Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakaha Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the elect of the nation of Israel. This is your brother Ayash Gabar from the GMS Virginia camp, coming at you with another short lesson that I pray that you find edifying through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. And I was watching this video earlier yesterday, and this guy here, he talks a lot of shit for the most part, but he talks the same shit that Jake talks. When you talk to Jake, who's in the world, they don't really think that, it's going to be as bad as the prophets say it's going to be. They just can't fathom the fact that the time that's coming is going to be the worst time that's ever been upon the face of the earth. And somehow they think that they're going to be able to pull out of whatever situation that they're in, and when I was listening to this guy, every now and again, I like to watch certain videos, to get a pulse on the mindset of certain people, and particularly in this case, people who call themselves preppers. I mean, they're more aware in some cases than your average Joe, but they're ignorant to the fact of how bad it's going to be, as well as what time they're in. You see, these people just can't understand that we're in a time where Jacob's trouble is going to kick off at a level where, a lot of, I assume that this is a Jake, up in New York as a firefighter or ex-firefighter or whatever, but, Jake just don't understand. Salakia. Jake just don't understand how bad it's going to be. And so with that, they like to talk shit. They like to sit back and say, nah, it's not going to get that bad. But while they're saying this, one way, they're talking about how the scriptures talk about how it's going to be really bad. So, I just find it somewhat amusing that, he's a double-minded man. A lot of them are double-minded, you know what I'm saying? But for the most part, they have no idea, even though the prophets are out there telling them that it's going to be the worst time ever. So I will grab a few precepts, starting with the book of Romans, chapter 3 and verse 3. For what if some did not believe? This guy doesn't believe it's going to get that bad, even though he's in New York. And then on top of that, even though a few years ago, he's even come out of his own mouth and said, what those men standing on the street corners were talking about, it's fucking coming true. So out of his own lips, he's actually admitted that the words of the prophets of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai has been telling the truth. But over the course of the years and over the course of the weeks, months, and days or whatever, his attitude has changed to, well, his attitude has always been the same, but, he doesn't believe that, the way the true worshipers of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai do. So, for what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai without effect? The fact that he doesn't believe that we're in a time of a great tribulation and and all out anarchy, chaos, and mayhem, it doesn't take away from the fact that these things are going to happen. And also the fact that his face is plastered on the internet makes him a target within the environment that he lives himself, because when you sit back and you watch this video and you watch his proud word, and you listen to his proud words, he'll sit back and say, it ain't gonna be that bad. We preppers have nothing to worry about. These are the days that we've been training for, or these are the times that we've been prepping for, not knowing that, again, this is just going to be the worst time in Israelite history or world history, because when you think about it, it is going to be the worst time, the all-out death of the Israelites, nuclear destruction, the famines, the pestilences, all of this play a role in how bad it's going to be, and even though this Jake is wearing this t-shirt that says "Be hard to kill," he's going to be easy to kill if it's his lot. If Yahweh Shem Yahushua deems this guy to be easy to kill, that t-shirt that he's wearing ain't gonna mean shit, and if he's not of the elect, he definitely ain't got no covering. And I can't see this guy having any type of covering of Yahweh Shem Yahushua, because he has said some things that have condemned him already, So continuing on with the book of Romans, chapter 3, continuing on to verse 4. Yahweh Shem Yahushua forbid, yea, let Yahweh Shem Yahushua be true, but every man a liar. So the words of the prophets, the true prophets of Yahweh Shem Yahushua reside here in GMS, and of course you got your affiliates, but the true prophets of Yahweh Shem Yahushua lay here in GMS, and the words that we have been saying is true. Everything that we have been saying, starting with our elder apostles on down, has been true, and it's come to pass. And the people are going to realize it a lot sooner than later, but for a lot of them, it's just going to be too fucking late, So here it is. Donald Trump has played his hand, so to speak, in such that, like with these tariffs, it has actually shown the weakness of Babylon the Great, to the point where, these other heathen nations are starting to realize, and ask the question, have thou become as weak as we? So you also have to contend with that in the up and coming days, And when you sit back and you listen to jakes like this, you almost want to laugh at it. But it's a serious thing, because, a lot of jakes just don't realize that, the calamities that's going to be going on here is, it's going to be multifold. They've already got the Gerger troops here. They already got the blue caps here. They already got these other nations here. And these other nations don't even like you. So when you sit back and you listen to jakes like this, who's a part of a so-called prepper community, a lot of them like, to sit back and say, well, we could get together and we could join teams and we can make shit happen, Captain. But it ain't going to turn out that way, because the scriptures clearly tell you that people are going to fight one amongst another, with swords in their hands. And I'm talking about the people who were once close during the Green Tree. Here it is, I'm pretty sure this Jake's got neighbors in the apartment complex that he stays in. I'm pretty sure he's got neighbors that smile in his fucking face, that he walked past in the elevators, what I'm saying, who have seen his videos. They'll smile in your fucking face now, but when all hell breaks loose and there's a shortage of food in the store, there's a shortage of information on what to do, there's a shortage on all types of shit, that they're going to turn and they're going to look to him, they're going to turn and look to his goods, and again, that t-shirt that he's wearing is a lie, because Jakes like this have made themselves a target. Even Jakes in the world, as I was saying earlier, when you sit back and you listen to the bullshit that they talk, Jake will talk a good motherfucking game, until shit happens. And when things happen to Jake, now it's something else. Now it's another element that Jake didn't consider, and now Jake is fucked up. For example, Jake will talk shit to his fucking boss for weeks and days or even months, because somehow Jake seems to think that, he's needed within the workforce, not knowing that most bosses will get rid of his ass the minute he finds a replacement. And once that boss finds a replacement for your ass and fires you, and now you sitting back here with your fucking mouth wide open, not knowing what to do. But meanwhile, you talked all this shit about what ain't gonna happen and what somebody's not gonna do. Jake is the same way. Jake just like to puff himself up, and like especially if they got followers. If they have a whole bunch of people that they call a community that'll turn to look to him, then Jake always like to exude that type of authoritative energy. Well, in that time, your authority is going to go out the fucking window, because nobody's going to know what to do. And those people who turn to you for information, will soon turn away from you and take your goods. So Jake is in for some shit, The book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 16. Well, actually, let me finish Romans 3 and 4. Yahweh Hashem Yahushai forbid. Yea, let Yahweh Hashem Yahushai be true and every man a liar. This shit that this man was talking about, as far as nothing's going to happen, you're going to be good, you people are worrying too fucking much. He's a liar. He's a bald-faced liar. And that's what I was saying earlier. This Jacob says some shit that actually condemned him. And the fact that he's actually going against what the scriptures say as far as how bad it's going to get makes him a liar. As it is written, that thou mightest be justified in thy sayings, and mightest overcome when thou art judged. So you really got to watch what you say. You really got to watch the words that are coming or rolling off your lips, because that pride of you thinking that you can't be touched, that haughtiness of thinking that you have enough to sustain you during the times that are coming, is more of a reason for Yahweh Hashem Yahushai to judge your ass. It's almost like that man in the New Testament, who gathered all his food in his storehouses, who approached Yahweh Shai. And Yahweh Shai was like, you fool, your soul I require this day. And the goods that you laid up for somebody else. It even tells you that in the Psalm, in the Psalms of Solomon. Don't lay up your shit for this side, because all you're doing is you're laying it up for somebody else to have, and Abaratazah, those things that this Jake has laid up will be laid up for the elect. You know? And another thing about it is there's a lot of Jakes that's actually taking the stand that this guy on your screen has. A lot of Jakes, got this cardinal mindset that, if I store enough canned goods, or, if I vacuum seal, or if I bottle vacuum seal some vegetables in a fucking mason jar, and keep it on my shelf, it'll sustain me. Well, that does multiple things to you. One, it caused you to have this mentality that, you can't go nowhere at this point. When you start having all these goods, in one location like that, the mindset is to protect your goods. Well, wisdom would tell you is that, like if a whole bunch of people are trying to rip in your fucking door, don't try to protect the shit that you ain't gonna have any motherfucking way, but Jay got this mindset that, he's got enough ammo and no enough people on the block, to fight off whoever comes knocking at his door, only to get himself and his family hurt. You know what I'm saying? Because if people come knocking on my motherfucking door and they just keep coming and coming and coming, well, guess what? I'm going to get the fuck up out of there. Through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, of course, move in the spirit. But common sense would tell you, if these people will keep coming, and trying to knock in your fucking door, and of course the men of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua will move in faith and not by sight. But your average Jake will try to hoard them off, not realizing all it takes is a fucking match to burn down a fucking building, and then what? You lost your life trying to hold down to some carnal bullshit. The book of 2nd Ezra, chapter 16 and verse 40, "O my people, hear my word, make you ready to thy battle." And what is that battle that's coming? First and foremost, it's that spiritual battle that you should be dealing with, or try to deal with, because a lot of things that's happening is happening on the spiritual level first. As it is in heaven, so it is in earth. So a lot of Jakes don't know how to deal in the spirit, which will lead them into dealing with shit on a carnal level at a higher level. And even then that, a lot of Jakes are going to be destroyed. Because you can't come across Eve at his blessing. Shit. He got his kids training down at the age of 6. Meanwhile, you Jakes in fucking TikTok videos doing challenges and shit with Will Smith and Tatiana, whatever the fuck her name is. And if it isn't that, you sitting back and you watching Jordan versus LeBron, who's fucking better. Come on, man. Those things are just distractions, to keep you Jake sleep. But meanwhile, this devil is sharpening his fucking sword right in front of your fucking face. But you don't think that sword is for you because you don't even know who your enemy is. And this Jake on the screen don't realize who his enemy is. And in those evils, be even as pilgrims upon earth. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Because you might have to leave the dwelling place that you're at, because it just may get that fucking bad. Every man has his time for whatever is going to happen to him. But the scriptures say, even be as pilgrims upon the earth. You can't be a pilgrim upon the earth trying to protect the fucking goods that you think that is going to sustain you through the time of Jacob's trouble, through the economical collapse, through the MOTB. Because again, the scriptures say they're going to kick you out of your homes. So if you have all this shit in your fucking house and they kick you out, then what do you have? You have nothing. You know, you don't have the name of Yahweh Hashem Yahushua to pray to because you haven't sought him early before the evil days draw nigh. So you don't have that. You know, you might not have any fucking clothes on your back because this devil's just that fucking wicked, you know, to kick you out your house with nothing on your back. You know, it might happen in the wintertime. It might happen when the fucking power goes out. Next thing you know, the building that you in is being raided by fucking Gurga troops, kicking you out your building and throwing you in a fucking van. And then the next night, you know, the rest of the building on the next building, you know, until enough of you jakes just either fold or get thrown in the fucking FEMA camps. You know, and guys like this is either going to get dealt with in one way or go into a fucking FEMA camp. You know, because in the eyes of the NWO, he's too fucking dangerous. You know, he's dangerous in their eyes. You know, you jakes who are gonna rebel, you know, who actually think that nothing's gonna happen, you know, and when it does happen, you think you're gonna be all right because of the goods that you have and the people that you may know in the community that you built. You know, you're too dangerous for this new system. You know, and this devil just gonna fucking take you out. You know. See if I got some more precepts. Yeah, so you have to have the mindset of leaving all that shit behind, even your preps. You know, but you know, this Jake has built his whole platform on preps. You know, and let's say for example, he does have another location, you know, out in the fucking wilderness or out in the woods or whatever. You know, you got to get there. You know, you have to get from P1 to P2. You know, and you actually think it's gonna be fucking peaches and cream. You know, you try walking down the fucking block, Salakia. You try walking down the block with a big ass fucking rucksack on your back, trying to leave your apartment complex, you know, to jump in your vehicle, which is going to be a no-no anyway because if it's dark outside, you know, you start your vehicle up, you got to turn your lights on, and now other people know you're in a fucking vehicle, which makes you a target. And if you do it during the daytime, especially when nobody ain't got shit and you got a big ass fucking rucksack on your back and you're trying to move from point 1 to point 2, well, guess what? You just made yourself a fucking target then too. You know? Jake is just gonna fucking rob you. So he doesn't realize how bad it's gonna get. You know, his home just may be his fucking coffin. Because it's just gonna get that bad. You know? Let me see. Let me see. The book of Psalms, chapter 44 and verse 6. For I will not trust in my bow, neither shall my sword save me. Yeah, you know, if Yahweh Hashem outshine with you, your bow ain't gonna do shit. You know, even if you got this mentality that nothing's gonna happen, and you realize at some point shit is going down, and you think that you're gonna run to your arms and, you know, grab your ammo case and go for broke, and it ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? If you mark for judgment, you're marked for judgment. You know? It all just depends on what judgment you get. You know? Are you gonna get the judgment of the righteous, or are you gonna get the judgment of the wicked? You know? And you're gonna see more judgment of the wicked than the righteous. You know? Because the scriptures say that the righteous shall scarcely be saved. So it's just going to be that bad even for the righteous of Yahweh Hashem Yahushua. And if you don't have the Lord, this is exactly what you're going to do. You're going to trust in your bow, and you're going to trust that your sword is going to save you. And Yahweh Hashem Yahushua got a trick for your ass. So you may think that you might be hard to kill, but you might be the easiest motherfucker on the block to get. Because you've already made yourself a target. By talking shit, by scoffing, by doing whatever against Yahweh Hashem Yahushua. This mindset of ain't shit gonna happen to me is, it's gonna humble a lot of men. It's gonna humble a lot of men. Oh, ain't nothing gonna happen. It's a shit burger. Ain't nothing gonna happen. Okay. All right. And the thing about it is I just haven't heard it from this guy. I heard it from guys out in the world, guys that I work with, because as I said earlier, I like to get the pulse of the people. And, there's jakes at the plantation that think that they're Billy fucking badasses. Okay, you can be a Billy badass all you want. But the scriptures are telling me that men like you are going to be in travail. And quite honestly, I'd like to see how the fuck you're going to pull yourself out of it. Well, let me see. The book of Psalms, jumping down to the book of Psalms, chapter 44, jumping down to verse 7. But thou hast saved us from our enemies and has put them to shame that hate us. So we're looking for Yahweh Hashem Yahushua to do the work. We're very humble in this thing, in knowing that, this is real. And you can sit back and you can scoff at the prophets all fucking day, but the prophecies are still going forth. Which is why I led with Romans 3:3, because a lot of people still don't think that the prophecies are going forth because Yahweh Hashem Yahushua has got their eyes blinded. The book of Jeremiah, chapter 17 and verse 5. Thus saith Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, cursed be the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departed from Yahweh Hashem Yahushua. So, guys like this actually think that, a prepper community or a block community or a thug community, is going to save them. But not at all. Not at all. Yahweh Hashem Yahushua said, cursed be the man that trusteth in man. So if you put your trust in men other than in Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, then you're cursed. And your judgment is going to be a cruel one. You're going to get your ass whipped. Let me see. Let me grab one more. Let me see. I'm going to grab this last one and I'm going to close out. The book of Jeremiah, chapter 16 and verse 4. They shall die of grievous deaths. This Jake right here is going to die of grievous deaths. And those Jakes like him, because they're putting their trust in their goods. They're putting their trust in their own might. They're putting their trust in the skills that they think would pull them out of whatever situation that it is. Now on Monday, they might be able to do some shit that will get them out of some shit. Well, all that means is that on Monday, their judgment wasn't set, or their judgment wasn't given to them yet. But at some point, their judgment will be given to them. And that pride that they're going to have is going to be like through the fucking roof. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, you're going to have some Jakes out there that actually have this mindset of, when all hell breaks loose, that it's going to look like they fucking winning. But ultimately, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua gets the last laugh. So yeah, you may win on Monday and Tuesday in your mind. Well, that's only because Yahweh Hashem Yahushua let you win on Monday and Tuesday. But on Wednesday, that'll be your fucking ass. You know? So, jumping back into the book of Jeremiah, chapter 16 and verse 4. They shall die of grievous deaths. They shall not be lamented, neither shall they be buried, but they shall be as dung upon the face of the earth. And they shall be consumed by the sword and by the famine, and their carcasses shall be meat for the fowls of heaven and for the beasts of the earth. So, yeah, okay. If you don't think nothing's going to happen, keep that mindset. And if you have this philosophy of being hard to kill by being stealthy and, you know, be a gray man or whatever the fuck you want to call it, go ahead, knock yourself out. But Yahweh Hashem Yahushua said that you're going to die a grievous death. You know? You're going to die a grievous death. Such a for the sword to the sword, such a for the famine to the famine, to the captivity, you know? Pursuant to the book of Jeremiah. So you don't know what your lot is. All I know is that when I heard you talk, I heard pride. I heard pride. When I hear Jake talk about how shit ain't gonna go down, I hear pride. When I hear the nigga woman talk about how things ain't gonna go, I hear pride. They're not humble, but Yahweh Hashem Yahushua is about to make them very humble and bring them very low. You know? So, I'm going to close out on that. So, I like to give all praise, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakha Kodash, double honor to the apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations unto the elect of the nation of Israel. Shalom.